All right, you can see everything. Perfect. Hi there, my name is Bronwyn Bridges, and I am the CEO and co-founder of PragmaClin, as well as a PhD pharmacology researcher in the Parkinson's disease space. But before I tell you who PragmaClin is and where we are today, I'd like to introduce you to Gord. He was an avid runner his entire life until his 50s, where he noticed gait and slowness occurring. He brushed it off as age-related symptoms, as many people do, to avoid the emergency room, until a few years later, he started to have trouble with his balance and shaving in the morning. When Gord finally went to go seek help, he was told it could be a 1 to 2 year wait time to see a neurologist, and then had to travel to a different province to receive a diagnosis earlier. So if those who are in the call are not familiar with Parkinson's disease and how it progresses, it relies completely on the individual and looks incredibly different for each and every case. But the typical symptoms that typically manifest first in the motor sense are gait or shuffling, speech impairments. A tremor is mostly associated to Parkinson's disease, typically of the hand or the leg, and balance and coordination issues. However, typically several years before this, we also see cognitive function impairments such as sleep, depression, and more, which actually do not become as present in the beginning. And it means that Parkinson's has actually likely started to manifest several years earlier. So getting an earlier diagnosis, more follow-up treatments, and more accurate assessments are crucial to have advanced therapies and options available to these patients. Gord is now one of the 10 million people who have been subjectively diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and is only seen once a year for follow-up. And like many others, he also doesn't have access to a movement disorder specialist, meaning that he receives less than optimal care and access to new treatments on the market. So at PragmaClin, we've created PRIMS. It is a clinical decision support tool that provides real-time motion captured assessments from within the clinic. What this means is that patients do not have to attach any sensors to the body. They stand in front of our system, which has specialty depth cameras and uses computer vision to then accurately assess and track the severity of different symptoms for the Parkinson's disease progression of these patients. What we do is we follow a clinical standard so that in real time, these scores are displayed into a dashboard for clinicians, patients, and other stakeholders to show comprehensive, accessible data and notifications or red flags of rapidly changing symptoms to be able to better be alerted to how to change on the individual basis without needing to take as much time in these assessments away from the specialist. So far, we've been able to advance 10 algorithms to completion with an 85% accuracy of over 900 data points that have been collected in-house. We also have completed over 62 clinical assessments, and because we've been completing this in-house, we now have access to own and house all of our data in the database as a possible monetization later on. But we also wanted to help patients and caregivers, so we've created a mobile app in which we had released for free to do early beta testing so that we could determine all of the non-motor symptoms, all of the cognitive function, sleep, depression, and more, as a way for caregivers and patients to better track in between assessments. This currently is being completed once a week by users, and from here they'll also have access to local resources near them, such as exercise classes, free access to information, and places that they can go to get treatments. Why we're different than the competitors out in the market is we are not a wearable or a smartphone app, which they may seem like the hot trend in this space in digital health. However, we've ended up finding that through our customer interviews and discoveries, it not only is a problem for a lot of the end users who struggle with fine motor tasks and wearing things or strapping them onto the body, as well as the usability of using smartphones and setting it up properly in the home for these end users and their caregivers. But we also found from the clinical standpoint that these neurologists do not want to see the excessive amount of data that's not following their clinical standard practice and actually requires them to dive in more time when the patient comes into the office. So what we did was follow that standard approach from start to finish, exactly how they currently assess their patients, provide more objective data in a short and easy to read report that can then be interpreted not only by the specialist, but by other practitioners to increase the scope of those general practitioners, and that ease of use with real-time data. So it happens in real time and does not need to be scored on the back end because we've taken a data set and built it by clinicians for clinicians so that we knew it would be usable in the healthcare system to reduce those barriers. Our IP strategy so far far is we filed a provisional patent with our full PCT date coming up now. We've trademarked our name and as a company, but also as the product, as we have had quite a public-facing eye since the very beginning through a lot of conferences and presentations. And from here, we also completed our patent filing strategy as well as our freedom to operate, really to know how we're going to advance our IP strategy in the future. Our regulatory strategy, we did a pre-submission as a software as a medical device on our clinical decision support, but we have been consulting with some other advisors on a also faster second way to get to market that may be less regulated as an earlier revenue stream while we wait to regulate the larger de novo submission. And with this, we did find out those similar data size sets that have been used in clinical decision support that have been approved in this space so that we can base our clinical space off of that to receive the results that we need for approvals. We also have this full-scale clinical testing we're doing, and our goal for a full submission is by 2025. So far, we're on track, but knowing we do work with healthcare systems, we anticipate a little bit of wiggle room in that as well in our commercialization plan. We're planning to sell to hospitals, private clinics, as well as down the road, pharmaceutical companies. As another big gap we found in this space is the objective data in phase 3 clinical trials, leading to new drug discoveries, in where these clinical pharma companies, need this more objective data at a lower reduced cost than using the current neurology standard, with still being able to be validated against their scores. We also house it, as I mentioned, in our own personal ML container within the company, and that way we can monetize on that database and provide insights, not only just to Parkinson's, but also to trends within this ecosystem to find where people are located and how they can be better served in rural and remote areas. And we see 3 different pathways. And just in a quick overview, it's really that patients can perform this assessment right in the office before seeing the neurologist, almost as a triaging system. Option number 2 is that it's a rural patient that has a neurology appointment, and so they can actually go into those rural locations prior to coming into the urban center and complete it on a more frequent basis as well. And then also completing it via telemedicine is included in those 2. The market size is that there's 200,000 neurologists who currently see these Parkinson's patients. We have existing billing codes as well in the US to build out our current average annual subscription that we anticipate and have started to test within the market with our KOLs of 50,000. But we do know as well, when we tackle these future markets, these neurologists who are seeing Parkinson's are not only seeing Parkinson's, and we do have the ability to scale into those other disease states through our algorithms into MS, stroke, Huntington's, and more, bringing out the market size to a much larger space across the globe and following those international standards. The codes I just mentioned that have built up what our average annual revenue stream is per tiered patient model, meaning that these codes are currently in practice. Clinicians are familiar with them. There's different ways to bill, and we do fall under the standard approach needed to be able to bill for these and have started to test that within the market. Although we know it doesn't necessarily always translate to being fully covered, we have considered the other secondary and third pathways being applying for our own temp code within the US market and then a permanent code as possible down the line option, but are really grateful that there is an existing billing code to be able to be more palatable to the healthcare systems for earlier adoption of purchase. So far, we've been able to leverage over $2 million to date in non-dilutive funding through the Government of Canada, provincially in Newfoundland, through NRCI RAP and more, as well as pitch competitions from across the globe that have helped us to not only fund the business, but then gain traction and support with KOLs as well worldwide, including some of the partners we've been able to get from that, such as the University of Cork, King's College, Northeastern, Maine Health, and more, who are now validating our technology to be able to get through regulatory approvals. The team consists of myself, a PhD Parkinson's researcher, as mentioned, who's clearly very passionate about what we're doing, but also my co-founder, Gord, you saw running in the Boston Marathon earlier, who is a serial entrepreneur and now lives with Parkinson's and is our COO and my co-founder full-time. Working on this daily has been an inspiration to not only us as an executive level with Colin, our CTO and CPO, but to be able to build out a team of experts in research, operations, software development with machine learning experience, and more. And we have KOLs because we know that's incredibly important to have these key opinion leaders in the space to be able to put our names into the room of the right people, as well as the people who make the final decisions on adoption. And Ray, one of the top researchers in Parkinson's disease at King's, say this will help to optimize his treatment strategies and provide that better end-to-end care. We have a lot of things that we're working on and are planning for the future here now as we finalize our trials to go into our regulatory approvals. But with our next round and over the next 18 months, we're looking to complete our FDA approvals, finalize the production of our hardware system to be able to then expand into those other disorders like Huntington's being a first, and hire more into the sales channels so that we can start to have a commercialization plan ready post-regulatory to start selling right away. We're currently now seeking $750,000 as our pre-seed round and have a lead term sheet in which we're leaning on to close the rest of the syndicate. We're looking to, as I mentioned, hire the clinical lead, complete that work, our clearance, and hire for business development to scale out the manufacturing that we're working on with our product. And we would love if you would join us and are interested in introducing us or having a conversation to further the success of PragmaClin so we can help all of those with movement disorders across the globe. Thank you.
Wonderful job, Bronwyn. Under 11 minutes, perfect. Right in the middle, fantastic. I'll give everybody, yeah, we've got claps. I'll also add my own clap, but I'll give everyone maybe just 30 seconds or a minute to write down any notes. And then I'll invite whoever's eager and ready to provide feedback to go first, or I'll call on you. Okay, I'll invite Martin to go first.
Okay, thanks. Where to start? This is great. That was an excellent pitch. I love it. You had me the whole way through. Like, you had my attention the whole way through. Really well done. I really like the model with the app lead-in. I wonder if you could develop that more. How do you keep using that to drive the rest of the business and validate and do, I don't know, even pricing testing, etc., right? I think you did a really good job of the competitive landscape, both the slide and the way that you kind of understand the market and spoke to it. I wouldn't change a thing. Same with the regulatory strategy. I think that came off really, really strong. One thing that you said a whole bunch, which is, I guess, maybe obvious in retrospect, but you kept saying KOL.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a term that I know. And then like you described it
Mm-hmm.
at the end, but I'm like,
I was thinking that the whole time. I was like, I just realized I never say it to key opinion leaders, and I was just KOLs because it's so much faster to get out. And then at the end, the slide said it, and I was like, yeah, I definitely need to say that earlier. So
just a minor thing, but I kept
thank
thinking
you.
that, like, yeah. I've kind of like maybe 3 different points, but they're really all the same point. I think I'll start with the slides. So I like the way you built the TAM bottom up, but I think the slides are backwards. Right? Like, first is you have like how are they actually going to buy it? How does that make into codes? Okay, and that rolls up to 200,000 neurologists, and like, I think it's a really strong bottom up approach. Just for me, I don't know, other investors might be different, but like I like that story of like how'd you build it up, and I wondered what pricing validation you did.
Great question. I was gonna say that was only 2 though. Was there a third one that tagged onto that?
And then that kind of like, I think you did a good job of explaining how you make money. The third one is, how does the ecosystem make money?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that makes really good sense. But is that 10% of the, or 50% or whatever of time or charges, or like how does it impact the ecosystem?
Those are all great points. Yeah, so the first part, because I hope if I forget anything, please circle back to me. But the market size, we did indeed do it that way, and it was because we sell to neurologists or hospital systems, I should say, who have the neurologists. So we know the amount of neurologists. And I think this is something we've still been kind of trying to tackle internally. So if you have any advice, I'm very much open and happy to have a conversation. But that is who pays, but it is not the amount of Parkinson's patients. And there is limited data on the correlation between the two, because as you saw, 9% see specialists, which means that a lot of these are just in the ecosystem, not being diagnosed by neurologists. So we don't pay on a per patient basis, which makes it difficult because we know how many patients and roughly where they're spread out, but we don't necessarily know who's seeing them. It could be general practitioners if they're really desperate. It could be more. So trying to figure out, we know our first market is neurologists and movement disorder specialists because it's like an easy, we know they're seeing these people for sure. The other more difficult down the road is going to be to figure out those clinics who probably don't have a movement disorder specialist, but we know we can monetize off of it because they have Parkinson's patients and there's limited data on that correlation. So we've still been, I say, struggling on determining the market size rings because of how to tackle not only just how many neurologists, but those that also see all these other subset specialties of Huntington's, stroke, MS, things like that. So I don't necessarily have, that was more of a comment of advice and help that I'm open to, but still trying to tackle on how to better approach the wording for that and the layout for that. When you said to shift the order, the ideal order, I'm just looking at my slides here on this side, would be, can you say it one more time so I can make a note of it?
From my perspective, and anyways, I've been in enough pitches to know that people don't agree. So I'm just gonna put that out there, right? But like from my perspective, it would be the codes and how you've identified where it fits into the existing codes and where you could have other codes and that's how you're going to price individual assessments or scans. And then you build that into patients or neurologists or how many visits there are, and that means that you have a total addressable market.
Okay.
That from my perspective. And yeah, and if you're interested, you have like a spreadsheet model or something like that, and you want to go back and forth, I'd be happy to try and help you figure out a way to model that.
Awesome, thank you. And the other note was, see, I know I'd forget if we did a 3-part question. Was on
how they make money.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
how
the
yeah.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, I don't know if it's best to put that in that business model flow chart that says the clinics, the hospitals, the pharma codes. I'm not sure if it's there or more so after we talk about billing codes, but we make money off of it being a software subscription that they're paying for how many patients they have, and they can see once we can validate and show how much of a revenue generation lift a lot of those clinics are getting because of the billing code. So if you have 100 patients and you currently can only see 100 patients, if you're saving this much time, like you mentioned. So currently, I don't know best other, this is an advice question. Things that we can assume based on conversations and data out there versus what we can say in a slide that hasn't been validated by us internally in terms of, we have an assessment, it takes 10 minutes. Currently, they're spending this much time on average of the conversations we're having. If it means they can save 10 minutes, they can see, 2 patients more per day. That's this much more money per week, etc. Those are assumptions that we can make and can assume. Will you think that be like, pressure pointed of like, but have you actually validated that that is a number? Because we haven't done the economic studies on it yet to know for sure.
I think, yeah, it's a fair question. I would lean to including it and speaking to validation, because
Okay.
I think if you don't talk about it, then I'm wondering, like, do you understand why they're going to buy it? Like,
Right.
like I think part of your pitch has to be what's the value for your end buyer.
Mhm.
And I mean, the story of Gord, etc. is great, right? Like, so I think that's good, the emotional impact, but like, where's the dollars coming from? I think speaking to, I have a model, we have, I mean, I think you just spoke to it there. Like, it's not, you made something up, but you have some data, you've talked to some people, and you have a plan to do further validation. I think that's fairly strong.
Okay, and I can mention too that in those trials, some of the secondary endpoints that we are validating the accuracy, but the secondary endpoints are how much time it took, the resources that were used in order to do an assessment, etc., so that we can then cross-validate to the benefit that it would be economically. I just don't mention that, like you said, so I will.
I think that's strong. I think that's strong if you mention it up front when you talk about data, and then talk about it in business model validation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Martin. Yishel, you have your hand up. I love it.
Yes. So just building off of the previous conversation with Martin, because this is something that's very closely to what I've done in my past life. And then speaking of CPT codes, I think there's two approaches here. A, be aware of who the audience is, because if you're pitching to investors who are not necessarily familiar with CPT codes or OHIP billing codes, they're going to be like, what is she talking about? Where does this tie in? That's the first point. And then with regards to CPT codes, those are reimbursements to the clinic or the hospital system in the US, and the OHIP billing codes would be for Canada. So I'm not sure what your plans are for Canada and if your primary target market is the US. But coming back to the CPT codes, I think it would be neat if you can show that, just take average numbers of patients that come into the clinic, as you just mentioned, and show how much the clinic would get in reimbursement. Because I think one piece that you haven't touched on is what you would be charging. And so you can show that if the clinic is making their money back and potentially they don't need to pay anything for your device because you're priced in such a way, because they're going to get it all back in reimbursement or more, then that kind of addresses the problem of market adoption of why neurologists, because sometimes, they don't want to deviate. Money, once again, not a great incentive, but sometimes it is an incentive. In the US, there is a big incentive for clinics to actually adopt products if they can make money off of it. So if you can address the business model of what your pricing is, as well as what the clinics are getting back in one slide, I think that would be really powerful. And then just to the second point that was being discussed, given that you are a medical product and medical device, it would be nice to see, and I know you mentioned on the last slide that you've done several clinical trials or preclinical research work. And so if you're enrolled in any of the clinical trials currently where you have a path to market adoption, you have a path into the sales cycle of a hospital or healthcare system, having that stand alone just provides a lot of credibility from the perspective of it being a medical product, and knowing that the medical industry is just really, really hard to penetrate unless you have concrete stakeholders within the landscape of what you're doing.
Can I just echo? Oh, sorry. Can I
No, I was
just
just saying,
echo,
writing it down. All good.
the first thing that Yishel said, because I thought CPT codes were something you're going to charge.
Okay, perfect. I will note that.
That's great.
I wish we
Great
could
point.
full amount.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, I mean, it's been so interesting listening to Yishel and Martin, your feedback, because I'm one of those people or investors who come in without that like medical background as well, and listening to like how you're like the feedback you're getting is so interesting. So from that hat of like, this really intrigues me, you had me invested from the get-go, I'm super interested in this. I still like the things that are nagging are the same thing, so I won't harp on it too much, but business model, target market. And like, there's always this nagging, like, I kept thinking, like, I feel like I missed it, but to Yishel's point, where are you at? Like, how close are you to market? And I was like, did I miss it and she is already in the market or not? Like, where is that exactly? So there was just that, and that's kind of a big piece of it. And I feel like you probably did answer that, but it wasn't really standing out. When I first saw the like, this is our plan chart, and then you highlighted the segments, I was like, oh, that's a cool way to show that. But also I didn't walk away knowing exactly what's happening next. So if there's a way to like really highlight something that's going to help validate where you are, help us provide more of that market validation, that's really helpful. But I think you did such a beautiful job, Bronwyn. Like, it's honestly, like, for me, listening to this, sure there's things you can adjust in your pitch, but also I want to have a second conversation with you and see your data room. So it's like you did the thing you're supposed to do at a pitch, you know what I mean? So there's things we can still adjust, but that's still like a fantastic job. Like, these are nitpicky-ish things. Like, yeah, being more clarity on your business model is really important, but also like we're all interested enough to get that clarity. So I think that's like a really important take home. And then these are things to tweak at the end of the day. But it was, yeah, beautifully done. Every time I had a question, you answered it. So that's kudos for that. You've obviously worked really hard on this.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words. I noted that too, and just to note a little bit more about exactly where we are, what level of readiness, and then steps, more clear from that slide, more so near the end, I feel, I agree completely.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bronwyn. That was wonderful. And you're hearing that feedback week over week, which I love, that that anytime a question came up, it was answered in the next slide. So that's fantastic. I'm not sure, we've got to switch over to the next pitch, but I did just want to give Colleen, I'm not sure if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Very quickly, excellent pitch. The only thing that wasn't not maybe completely clear about was around the go-to-market in terms of the regional aspect or the geographic aspect. I wasn't clear, are you going into, because one's chart had US, and then in the strategy I saw Canada, and I was like, I'm not sure where we're going here. So just maybe a little clarity on that.
Yep, absolutely. I have slides for that, not in this deck, so I will swap them into here. That's perfect.
Yeah, it was really well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you, Bronwyn. Okay. Rashmi, share your deck. I'm going to stop the recording.